Okay, we are live now, and Happy New Year, everybody. I'm so glad everybody's here, and we'll just take a couple minutes for everybody to join in. We kind of started 1 minute earlier, but I see some familiar faces here and some new friends here. Joel is here, Heather's here, Michelle, Sarah, Colleen, Courtney, Rebecca. She's been doing some really awesome work, by the way, Rebecca Henson, if that's the same Rebecca.
Awesome.
But you guys should go check her Instagram out. She is one of the portrait artists that I really enjoy seeing her work on Instagram. And of course, we have Raymond Bonilla here. So it's time and we can get it started. So before we get started, I just want to say Happy New Year to everybody. And thank you again for being here at Sentient Academy. It's a new year and we have something new. We always have something new, right? Right? Like we always have something new out there for you guys. And to get 2023 kick off, we just launched 2 new mentorship programs. One is Kai. He's actually going live to this first class, maybe in half an hour. I can't remember. And then Ray's program is going live too. So that's one key thing we're launching this year. It's a lot of new mentorship programs because we realized that just being at home watching online video with no feedback is not going to help you. And of course, every time we design something, design a new program, we talk to the mentors a lot to really understand what you guys need. And in the process of chatting with Ray, we talk about this topic, you know, the stages to become a gallery artist. And then we just kind of look at each other on the phone, thinking we should be recording this all along. And that's why we have this topic today for you guys. So I don't want to take up too much time. I'll have Ray get started. We have a little topic here. We're going to use Ray's real life experience to build his career, to even get awarded from both, you know, like illustration side of the career path and also the gallery side of it. And how did he manage to get so much done and always been innovative? And of course, there are 3 key stages to make that happen. And I'll have him tell his story. And then if you stick around till the very end, we'll have a good portfolio review from Ray. So if you want to kind of take some time to gather some of your work ready to go, you can send it through chat, and then we'll take a look at that at the end of it. So Ray, you can take it away now.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Keith. And thank you everyone for joining us today. So like Keith was talking about, we were, this talk kind of came around just about in a phone call that we were having. And that we were, when we were sort of building what the vision of the mentorship was going to be. And, you know, we came to the sort of ultimate goal of it being getting people ready to become gallery artists. And we talked about how, you know, what are those stages to becoming a gallery artist? Because I think it's a very elusive thing, you know, when one thinks about it. When you want to just say, like, I want to be in galleries, it's so broad, right? And it's so hard to get information that's or set yourself up so that you have a track to go down that will help you ultimately, you know, get where you want to be. And so, as Keith had mentioned, you know, when I had went to school, I actually had many different types of career tracks and things I wanted to do. I actually went to, I got my degree, my undergrad degree, actually in new media. So it was like computer graphics and things like that. And I moved to San Francisco to attend the Academy of Art University master's program for character animation, 3D character animation. So I wanted to work for Pixar, ILM. And after a semester, I had realized that I really love drawing and painting, and I really love telling stories. And so that's when I rolled over into the illustration program there, headed up by William Mon. We call him Bill, and so Bill's program was really interesting because it was a program, it was illustration. However, Bill was also the head of the fine art MFA program. And so people like Brian Mark Taylor went through that end. And the way he set up the training was that the illustrators trained with the oil painters and vice versa. There really was no difference. We shared the same studios. The only difference was just sort of the portfolios that we would have. And so when I left school, I was very much interested in working as an illustrator, but also working as a gallery painter. And I made 2 portfolios for that. Right out of school, though, I really wanted to focus. I needed to make a living, and I had some prospects. I didn't get necessarily, like, I had a lot of friends that got jobs right out of the bat. I didn't, but I did get gallery opportunities, which is really interesting because I didn't plan on that. And so I got into 2 galleries, one in Kansas City and another one in Park City, Utah. And while I was trying to work on my illustration stuff, and I thought that, that was a really great learning experience for me, because in the Kansas City gallery, I sold work. I had 3 pieces, and I remember selling 2 of them. I was like, oh, this is great. I can make a living. And then I got the Park City gallery, and I ended up not selling anything. And I would send them paintings or send them images. Hey, do you want this? Hey, do you want this? And they accepted a couple of them. I had a show that, a group show, flew out. I thought, this is the beginning of stuff, because I'm selling stuff in Kansas City. This is great. And nothing, right? I think I sold 1 piece in 2 years or something like that. And eventually I was dropped. And the Kansas City gallery didn't really invite me back into shows. And so I was just kind of distraught, because I thought, like, well, if I painted something and I felt it was good, galleries would want it, right? And I didn't realize, I started to ask myself, well, why? Why did that happen? And I started to realize that I was really unprepared to be a gallery painter at that time in my career. So I decided to myself, I needed to have first kind of a skill-based setup. I mean, my skills were okay. They were good, but I needed to have, further my skills and push myself in order to find out what I was interested in, what I wanted to paint ultimately. Because being a gallery painter is not about just executing a painting, like a subject or something like that, here and there, and then just putting them on the wall. It requires the same focus as, it requires illustrators, to always have a focused body of work. And so I continued as an illustrator, working for publications. First did a bunch of fantasy work. That was the only work I can get at the time, but I learned a lot about the process of doing, working efficiently, working with art directors, communication. And in between jobs, I would work on a painting that I wanted to do, in the hopes that it was just as a piece of personal work, but kind of figuring out who I was as an artist. And I would try all sorts of subjects. And, as I kept going further and further, I was getting, starting to do work for, like, the New Yorker magazine, and had my work in Communication Arts magazine as well. And started to win awards, from illustration, which was great because it gave me a lot of exposure. I remember my first big award was my first award was an honorable mention from the Society of Illustrators of Los Angeles. And I remember one of my mentors, David Grove, had said that was his first award, and as an illustrator. And I was like, wow, that's so great, and then eventually I got a gold medal at the Society of Illustrators, New York, in advertising. And I thought, again, things were, going well. I was starting to, like I said, editorial illustrations and things like that. But as I had gaps in my, because illustration is sort of feast or famine, just like anything. When you're working for yourself, it's not necessarily stable. So in between the jobs, I started, like I said, I was painting, and as I was painting, or as I was waiting for jobs, that gap started to get a little longer, a little longer, a little longer. But I started to want to paint more and more and more and more instead of do illustration. And at that point, I was able to get a body of work together, centering on things that uh, would be kind of what I'm known for now. And the so in this slide that you have right here is essentially a breakdown of that. It's the one on the left was my a piece that I did in grad school, and for my illustration portfolio. And then the next one, the one next to that, is a piece for the New Yorker that I did. It was my first New Yorker piece. And then the third painting after that was actually one of the first personal paintings that really kind of set me on the path. Because in between illustration jobs, I wanted to paint things that were significant to me, because a lot of times as an illustrator, you don't necessarily, while it's exciting to work on new subjects, uh, ultimately it's a collaboration, right? And ultimately you're doing artwork for someone else. And so if that person is not satisfied with the artwork, then you have to make sure you have to do what you can to remedy that and solve their problem, you know, in a way that pleases them. And so I when I would do my personal work, I wanted to do stuff that pleased me, because I wanted to be the art director. And so um, didn't have like these, I had these grandiose plans that I was going to do this, grand subject matter and things like that. But I was so tired from working all the time that, you know, and one day I remember I was getting coffee and light was coming through in my kitchen and one of my old apartments, that my girlfriend, now wife, had shared. And it came in at the same time every single day. Actually, it was at the end of the day. This was the end of the day. And I remember at the end of my workday, I'd always look at this bowl of fruit that would hit that, that would be receiving that light. And I thought to myself, I just got to paint this. This is what I want to remember about this place if I ever move, which I ended up doing, and so I started to paint things that were significant to me. It was also because I was reading a lot of books. The Art Spirit by Robert Henry, um, Hawthorne on Painting by Charles Hawthorne, Science and Practice of Oil Painting by Harold Speed, a lot of well-known sort of art books, but I was reading them over again and just sort of trying to absorb as much as possible. And so that's where, eventually I got into a gallery, and then I got into a second gallery and started showing a lot more. And then I got into a third gallery eventually. And then all of a sudden I turn around and now I'm an established gallery artist. But I realized that at that point that I had to have a singular voice in my work, while exercises were really good, I wanted to make sure that the work that I was doing was work that was me. Ultimately, I wasn't trying to do it for anyone else but myself. And so that's where my journey is, and it's constantly growing, because as Bill Mon had told us, as artists, we are ever evolving, and so we have to make sure that we are facilitate or have a career that facilitates growth, because once there is no growth, there's stagnation. And so and once that happens, the work goes downhill and you don't enjoy being an artist anymore. And so I guess that's where leads really well into kind of how to set yourself up for that, and I think we go to the next slide, the first step to becoming a gallery artist. Is anybody so should we take questions later
Yeah,
on?
Ray, I think that's a
Okay.
really good point. And we are going to start having a series of sessions like this whole year to really help you guys to think deeper. Because what we realized is a lot of people spend a lot of time on this first stage skill acquisition through school, through online learning, and all different things. And it's a lifelong journey to sharpen your skills. But if you don't think deeper, you're just gonna stay there and don't know where you're heading. And I actually want to take a break here and then talk about something worth mentioning in your last little 15 minutes about your journey. Is we started out in the beginning and you said you got into galleries, right? And a lot of people, I don't know about you guys. You guys have, please unmute, join the discussion in this next 5 minutes. We have a little more like a conversation here. Do you guys feel like entering into a gallery is like the end goal, or is it just a phase? Because in Ray's journey, he got in, and that didn't turn out to be the end. He actually got in, but didn't sell anything. And like you said, it's about 2 years of time, and then eventually got dropped. And then, like you have to go back there again. And of course, mentally, that's a big challenge to feel like you made it. You are a gallery painter. You were in the gallery, but then you got dropped. How do you get back up from there? I think that's something we all need to take a lesson from, because this is not an easy game. So based on that idea and conversation there, let's have you guys kind of talk and ask Ray any questions, if any, because I think that's a really big learning moment right there. If you guys really think about becoming a gallery artist, and of course, if you want to ask him to talk more about the definition of a gallery artist, does it mean that you have worked in a gallery, or does it mean something deeper? So that's for my take. But right now, let's take a few minutes for you guys.
Hey Keith. Hey Brandon, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Max.
Yeah.
Hey, so I don't know if you can see me too. So I joined in a little bit late, but I guess I just want to share my perspective so far. I've never really shown in a gallery. I've shown in I've been in a couple exhibits, just short term just gallery showings, and I've had paintings in like boutique shops before, but I've never really shown in a gallery. So, I mean, what I've heard is that some people, they don't think it's worth it because they take so much of a cut. But I obviously do see the benefits of, being able to show it in a space where, your art can kind of rise to another level just because of the setting that it's in, then having all those advocates of, the salesmen and everyone working at the gallery. But I'd like to know what you think about that the argument that it's not really worth it because of how much they take, and the pros and cons.
Yeah, Max, that's a great question, and it's definitely something I want to cover when we go and talk about market. But I can address it really quickly now, and then I'll dovetail back to it again when we talk about that in the point of the talk. But as ultimately you're an artist, right? And so it's about you make work that you want to make, and the job is your goal, if you want to make that work be a vehicle of sustaining your livelihood, right, is to put it in places where you can sell that work, or the work will generate income for yourself, so that you have more time and the opportunity to make more work, right? So showing in cheap shops, I mean, all of those places is great. You ultimately want to surround your work, or you want your work to be in front of people that want to collect you and want to support you. And galleries for centuries. The reason why galleries are still around is because it's a very focused place for that exact sort of exchange, that connection. And so you as an artist and them as a gallery, it's not like it's a single approach or a one-way relationship. It's definitely a business relationship that you get into. And so galleries are risking a bunch, a ton, showing you, and you're risking a ton showing with them. And so, we'll talk about kind of the commission rate and all that stuff when we get into the market, but it's got to be worth it, for you and for them, for that exchange to happen. And on the artist side, I feel like I'm not going to go and work with the gallery if I don't feel like they're, pulling their weight. And so I think it's absolutely, worth it. I mean, I've been lucky that I've had really good galleries, but relationships, and I've learned a lot from that. But it's also because I've done my research, and so yeah. So we'll definitely. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah. And also another thing I want to add to it is you need to look at it from another perspective to say how much is your time worth? Because if you want to do it all on your own, yes, you can take 100%, but are you willing to sacrifice your production time to be not productive, but be a salesperson? Because if you want to do 100%, it doesn't mean that you just sit around and the money will come in. It takes a lot of sacrifice of your valuable production time to do marketing, tax, selling, shipping, all of those things. You're basically signing up yourself for another, at least a part-time job to do all of that. And if you look at that, yeah, they may be taking, say, like, make it even 50%. But if that 50% of the stuff they do equal to a part-time job that'll take up half of your time, then that's the reason why they're taking that, because it's replacing that half of your time to do another job so you can focus on painting. So there's a lot of things going to this. There's not like a straight answer, yes or no. And as you know, like Ray's probably, doing illustration jobs too. So by the end of the day, it all depends on your own lifestyle, right? Do you want to juggle 3, 4, 5 side hustles and then also sell your work to make it work? Or do you want to focus on the two things? One, do illustration work, one, paint for the galleries and have them do the marketing. So there's not a right black and white answer for everybody, but I do want you guys to think about your personal situation to say what works for you and what do you truly want to accomplish, and make the best use of your time to make the judgment. Because there are people who are selling online just fine, right? Or there's someone like Ray, he's doing this and now he's able to even have enough to say, hey, I'm going to split some of the time out to run a mentorship program to help you guys to reach that goal. So it's all about where you want to get to down the road. So that's a really good question. Let's kind of get to the next part, is the skill side, to kind of see what are the key 3 stages. As you can see on the slide, first stage is skills, and then the voice, and then the market. And I'm just excited for Ray to share more stuff with you, because like I said, we already talked about this several times. So hang in there. And if you have any questions during the talk, just share your questions or perspective. That will help Ray to draw out more good answers. And that's kind of how we got started. We just started talking for like an hour, but we didn't hit record. So this is your chance.
Yeah. So yeah, actually, this is the reason why we turned this into a 2-hour thing, because Keith and I would, hop on for 15 minutes and it would be like an hour and a half of us talking to each other about of like this exact thing, So yeah, good times. So so the skills part. Okay. So what I realized, after school, and really actually during school, especially around like my master's training, really was kind of like undergrad 2.0 is what I called it. My friends and I would joke about it, because it really was like I had to go back to the basics and relearn everything, because my undergrad wasn't really focused on just having a traditional foundation, of good drawing and painting skills and building those things up. It wasn't necessarily like a focus of it, especially in the classical context, in a figurative context, like the stuff that I really, the work that I really like representational painting. And so, and I also felt that like skill was one of those things that you just sort of learned. You did it, like you took a drawing class, and you would know how to draw, right? That's what the A in the class meant, right? But it wasn't until grad school and people like Bill Mon, studying with them, that I realized that skills were a way that it helped you, assisted you in making the work that you wanted to make. And so Bill would always contextualize things, and this is the way I teach too, why we're learning certain skills, why take certain steps, why, and what those certain steps can be applied to later on, and how they've done that. And so I think skills are a means to an end, not an end in itself, but they're definitely a really important part. And I'm constantly, you're constantly working on them as an artist. And teaching is this is one of the reasons why I love it, is because I'm able to actually practice and also execute the concepts, in front of my students as well. And so, I get the practice in, and also they see how, the principle that we have is being applied. So with skills, it's really about, the way I break everything down is like drawing and painting. They all go hand in hand. And so the way I have my interests lie in, because my interests lie in light and color, in form, three-dimensional form, representational painting, my skills are centered around enhancing those, trying to make it so that I'm as eloquent as I can be, in order to express those things in my artwork. And so, drawing, is key, but learning how to turn value at drawing, is so important to being able to do it in painting, because it has nothing to do with, you realize as you're going through skills, you're going through sort of your exercises and things like that, that the medium is irrelevant in many ways. It's what it's teaching you. And so I remember Bill was telling me that, if you have problems with value, then you don't understand it on an artistic level, enough to execute it in your own work. And so true understanding of something is being able to execute it and put it in your own work, because that's the ultimate goal, right? It's to use this stuff to make the stuff that you want to make. And so, after school, I taught at a university level for, I think, over 13 years. And so, during that time, I was always drawing from life, and setting up assignments for my students and drawing with them. And I still draw all the time and paint as much as I can, not, of course, for my gallery work, it's mostly taking up my time, but understanding, how to lay something out, or compose something, being in control of pictorial elements, simple things. You don't have to start, with like Mona Lisa level type of things to do an entire figure. I'd encourage you to do that to see how hard it is, but just taking like even like the first slide, where it's just a breakdown of how light and shadow affects forms, just do one form, the idea of forming cast shadows, how light falls, all of this stuff, how light reacts to form, that stuff, it needs, you really need to understand it on a really just like another level, because you have to express that visually, because ultimately this is a visual language. So we can't explain away, a piece. Our piece is communicating that to another person visually. So that's why, like, people across the world can have an emotional connection with a piece of artwork in a museum that was made by somebody who's been dead for hundreds of years, right? And so the skill, that's what you're learning. You're learning how to do that when you're building up your skills. And along the way, you start to fall in love with the process of making an image, because, I guess from the outside looking in, doing something like these are all plaster casts. Those three elements in the first thing were a plaster cast, and the next piece is like a head drawing, right? It's not, I remember looking at it. Well, I've always loved doing that, but I remember there were certain, other people in school with me that weren't necessarily interested in it. Like I even the simple shapes for me, it's like, I was like, I don't want to do that. That's simple stuff, But when you really understand how, the visual order of how things are put together, and taught the elements, and understanding how to control and execute those elements in your own work, just on a simple still life setup, this is not simple. It's actually pretty tricky. You start to realize that you can make magic, and it's a really exciting feeling, and you start to fall in love with the process of picture making. And I think that that's huge, is being able to fall in love with just the process of it, because you could start to then take those elements and then repurpose them for your own things. And so the way I teach is everything has to, it's like every part of the buffalo, right? Everything has to relate to one thing's got to relate to the next, and one lesson's got to relate to the next lesson. That's the way Bill taught me, and he told us the day the things that you're learning on your first day and your last day are going to connect, because that's what it's meant to do. And that empowers that information, because it's, while very beneficial in terms of like getting you exposed to many different methods, having teachers in one class, in a curriculum, tell you one thing, and you go to the next the next stage and they tell you something completely different, can be a little jarring, right? Because it doesn't contextualize the information, and the information just becomes no, it just this thing, this endpoint. So the way I look at it is learning, the same process that I used in the simple still life setup is the same process that I used in the two oil paintings that have two completely different subject matters. And it's a way of thinking, breaking things down and into something that's complicated into very manageable steps. So understanding that and learning why you're doing that, I think is something that you need in order to have a basis, or to be, in order to be proficient in the visual language. Because if you don't have that, then while you might have good ideas, they ultimately don't become visually realized. And you start to realize too, the better you get at drawing, the better you get at painting, you start to have better ideas because you become a better visual thinker. That's something that Greg Manchus told me, who's this great illustrator and painter. He did the Captain Morgan pirate. And he told me, it was really interesting. We were talking about sketches, and he says, it's never a coincidence that the person with the best ideas has the strongest skills, and the best visual ideas. And it's because, and I didn't understand that, because I always felt that I had really great ideas. I just didn't have the skills to do it. And that's when I talked to him about it. I says, I felt that it was actually the other way. I had better ideas, but I just couldn't execute it. And I remember Greg was saying, it's like, you think you have better ideas, but remember, the idea has to be visual. It's got to be visual. It's a visual idea. And so what is it? What does that mean? You know, you have to learn the ins and outs of that part, which can be really daunting, you know, especially if you're starting from ground zero. But once you understand like how things fit together, it becomes less daunting, and it just becomes about just sort of building that's the blocks of skills.
Hey Ray, I
And
want to.
yeah,
Can I just kind of interject real quick?
yeah, please do. Yeah.
Yeah, so I love how you talk about this skill thing, and I can start to sense that instead of say like single-mindedly looking at say drawing skills, painting skills. So a lot of people look at it that way, right? I need to be really good
Right.
at drawing, then I'll be really, because I'm really good at drawing, I'm gonna be really good at painting. And then once I
Right.
finish that, I'm gonna be really good at XYZ. In a way, you're kind of going deep first and go really, really deep down that rabbit hole and then go to the next bucket of skills. Or some people, they look at it more like they are expanding their skill set, kind of like you have a wood shop. You can't just have, well, I guess some people can make everything with just one chisel and a hammer, but still you need a chisel and a hammer. But if you only have chisel alone, it's gonna limit what you can grow because you are lacking the tools in your toolbox. So the way I see you work is even just go back to that sketching to learn the line, shadow, and form. You should, and I challenge you guys, like you're doing this exercise, but then expand the approach to it. Don't just use pencil. Don't just use charcoal. Grab an iPad nowadays, right? Like do it digitally or paint it with oil paint, with black and white, paint it with different colors, or experiment different things so you have more and more understanding of all the principles all together. And while you do that, you're going to have a lot of new things come to mind to build this. I would call it a framework, because as you were talking about it, that's what comes in my mind. You're not just talking about a single tool. You're talking about a system. You're talking
Right.
about a shop. You're talking about a framework that is consistent throughout the first picture here to the fourth one here. You're following the same system of a process. And that's how you start to build a consistency of your work, because you develop a trust, a system that you can trust, basically, for you, for Raymond. And for
Right.
like I see Jane Ann is here and Luis is here, Max is here. Like all you guys probably have your own system that you will fall back on and feel comfortable. The more you think about it like a framework, as you acquire new tools, the more you can establish that system, and then you can trust your result. Because by the end of the day, if you have inconsistency, it's just going to make it harder to accomplish things, right? Like, do you agree
Yeah,
with that?
I think
More like a framework type of thing, rather than like go down the rabbit hole to be the perfect drawer, then I can move on to the next stage. What do you think?
yeah. Yeah, because I think, after teaching, that's a great point. After teaching as long as I've had, I noticed that um students don't necessarily notice this. I didn't notice this when I was a student, but if you have one problem in one medium, you're going to have the same problem in the next medium. And I've had students have taken drawing with me, and they've had issues when it comes to like light and shadow and things like that. Their drawing skills might be okay in terms of being able to describe linearly what the forms are doing, but when it comes to analyzing values and taking the information that you're seeing from life or from photo reference and distilling that down and expressing it, on paper, it becomes a different animal, right? It's a different story. And so it's really exciting when students realize like, oh, yeah, I have problems in charcoal with noses, and I'm having problems with noses in oil paint, because it's not the medium, it's the understanding of what's going on, right? And that's just a tool. And I show these 4 slides because it's kind of easy to see how one would build the drawing dovetails into the painting. But these steps, like starting with an underpainting, for instance, and almost like this sort of monochromatic grisaille, right? It's like a neutral. That is that's just a choice that I'm making. But I remember, it's something Bill taught, always would hammer home. It's really, it's not the what I'm doing, it's why I'm doing it, right? And so I've, as an illustrator, I worked digitally, and I've worked in multiple different mediums: acrylics, watercolor, gouache, mixing them all together, color pencil, airbrush. And I didn't take individual classes for any of those. Uh, all I figured out was I saw some, I learned how just the mechanics of operating it, the idiosyncrasies of a given medium. And then all I did was plug it into how I build an image. And so the way the way that skill building has been most valuable to me is, like Keith had said, is do it like a framework, understand on an intellectual level, 10,000 feet up, that you essentially have, in your, image making process, you essentially have a place where you have three big problems: shape, value, color, right? And so the shape is sort of, I don't know, is it a tree? Is it a farmhouse? The value is how light or how dark it is, and the color is what color it is, right? And artists across history have solved those three issues in their own unique ways, but there's a common thread that goes through them. And when you understand that, then it teaches you that the mediums are just a choice, and you could swap them in and out as you want to, at your whim. And that's what allows you to experiment. Okay. And that's the key to all of this stuff, is being able to experiment and entertain yourself and find out what works for you, and build your own personal framework. Because my greatest teachers that I've ever had have always asserted that it's, what they show you things not so that you can copy them, but you could see how or why they're making those, what the decisions were and why they were making those choices. And so people like Bill really taught me how to experiment. And when you're setting up your skills for yourself, don't lock it into a process that doesn't allow you to understand why you're doing things. Because once you're locked into that, then you feel trapped. It's like, I've only used this palette, this set of 3 colors, and that's all. I don't know how to get, what if I wanted to change the color, if or what if I always sketch everything in charcoal because that's the way I was taught. What if I hate charcoal? What if I wanted to do something else? What do I do? And so I'm laughing because I had those concerns, and so if you have those concerns, you got to ask yourself, what was the purpose of charcoal in the first place? Why do they use charcoal? Oh, because it's really easy to remove, and it puts down a really dark shape. Okay, so what are other things that you could do that is easy to remove that puts down a dark shape so that you can lay your shapes out? You could follow this like this process of, I'll explain, for instance, the process that I did with the hosta plant here. I did a line drawing, and I did a underpainting in a sort of a monochromatic. It looks gray, but it's actually pretty neutral. It kind of changes hues a little bit as I take the photos. That's just my camera. And then after I did a full execute the whole painting in one value to get all my drawing and my values set, and then I went over it on top of it with color, opaquely, semi-opaquely, and in some instances transparently, to colorize all of those areas. And so I just focused on my color. If you changed one thing, I did the drawing. I used to do the drawings in graphite. I did this drawing digitally, right? And then I mounted it onto a surface and then painted traditionally on top, oils for my underpaintings. And then I put oils on top of the oil, my colors. It's just an underpainting. I'm just mapping out values, then putting in color. So shape, value, color, right? If I did the drawing with a brush instead of a digital, my iPad in this case, or if I did it with a crayon, an oil crayon, that would produce different results. If I did my underpainting in acrylics, or if I changed the color I followed every single step after that. It would look like a completely different painting. So what matters is that you're solving the problem of shape and solving the problem of value and solving the problem of color. So
I love
I
that,
kind of
Ray.
always think about it like that.
Yeah, and then you're kind of going back to that same framework thing again. Like you discover a framework over all guidance of your process, and then there are a million ways to get from point A to point Z, right? Like how to get from this point to the next point. You have all the tools at your disposal, or even start experimenting. And I think the idea of experimenting and after you understand the why, kind of dovetail into this next thing is discovering your voice. And before we get into that, let's take a little break here. I don't know if you heard this before. This is actually the fun part why we have that kind of conversation, because we'll bounce ideas back and forth. I can't remember who told me that. He said when you were learning to become a visual artist, first we learn to draw or paint what we know. For example, we know it's a tree. Like my 5-year-old, she's drawing a person. And then first, like the head and the eyes and the finger, like stick figure, body and whatever, right? You first draw or paint what you know without observation. And then the next stage is you start drawing or painting what you see from direct observation. And then the next one is once you are really good at these things, you start to draw or paint what you feel. Did you hear about that from anybody? Or anyone of you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
So before we go into the voice, do you guys have any thoughts on the skill acquisition, or have any questions you want to ask Ray before we move on?
Yeah, I would. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, so as far as skill goes, so I'm 40. I've been a lifelong. I grew up with comics and loving to draw and color. But in the last year, it's been the first time I've very seriously started getting with my art and very focused. And I was just curious, for somebody who has a 9-to-5 job that is trying to transition into becoming a serious, even if a side hustle artist, where do you begin other than just like straight art school, maybe mentorships, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think that starting, because I think you realize it, it's at that because I'm pretty much 40. I'm going to be 40 in September. And like you realize that your time is, you have a 9-to-5. Your time is valuable, extremely valuable, and it's super limited, right? And so you don't want to waste your time. And so my advice to you is to figure out the type of artwork that you like doing. Let's just say you just like to draw or paint. It doesn't have to be anything grandiose, right? And then surround yourself with a person or a group that is that represents where you want to be. And I think the reason why people go to schools or do mentorships because it's focused, right? And this is actually, we were talking about this with the student today in one of the classes I teach online, and we were talking about learning 3D, right? And I'm learning 3D, and we were talking about how you could. This student was saying when I wanted to learn oil painting, I would watch these free tutorials on YouTube, but I would get frustrated because it just felt like it was just like, okay, this is how you draw a nose, or this is a demo of a head, and you just see a person make it, and you're like, okay, and you don't really know of what you saw, but you're impressed by it, and so having a focused a sort of mentorship or something like that that you invest your time and money into is beneficial, because you want to be involved with a person that understands how to take your interests and push your skills forward in a very linear fashion, so that you know that one step that the first step you take will get you to the second step, and the first and second will get you to the third step, and so on and so forth. So, I would just do your research, and it all depends on the person. If you find that you're really, good at teaching yourself things, and you could piece together things by taking mini courses, then that's fine too, but I find that there's, with mentorships and things like that, you're able to talk to a person. I think it's really important that you talk to a person, give them what your hopes and dreams are, so tell them what your interests are, and have that dialogue of like that back and forth of where you want to be and how to go about get there, because you need to borrow some eyes, as to paraphrase the teacher Jeff Watts, who would say, it's like, you're renting out my, he says to his students, you're renting out my eyes so that you can get to where you want to get to. So I hope that makes that answer your question.
Yeah. And I think another keyword you're talking about here is the structure, right? Like, love YouTube. Don't get me wrong. I'll spend like 2 hours on YouTube just scrolling through, but that's also the downside of YouTube, because it's unstructured. You will spend a lot of time. Think about you building a Jenga tower, right? You want to build this tower, so the next thing you can do is to destroy it and have fun with it, right? But you cannot just say, oh, I see someone draw this thing really impressive, I want to just put that top block in first and not worry about building up from the bottom. Like, it's not going to work. You'll put that block there right in the middle of the air without anything down below, it's just going to drop. But having someone like a good teacher or mentor side by side with you, as you put down each block, what block to go on first and what the next one is going to be. And then there you will build a good structure with the end goal in mind. And you can actually get to that top block faster if you really want to get the top block there, right? Like someone who's been through the journey before, or even like Ray, he's gone through, got in the gallery first, didn't work out, got dropped, and then how he built himself back up to find success in that again. That is something valuable, because not everybody can tell you, oh, I remember that one time when I completely failed. How do I stand up from where I failed? That is a good life lesson too. And of course, you'll avoid a lot of frustration and all that. And then before we get into the voice, a little story about, I can relate to this person because I never learned how to draw at all or paint. I didn't have any art class until I moved here from Taiwan, and I was 27. And I took my first art class ever. Everybody knows how to draw, like that first picture here. I have no idea. And still up to this day, I never learned how to draw, but I found my way around brushes. I know how to paint. I don't know how to draw, but I can learn how to paint online just fine. But what I found out is I plateaued, and I cannot get to a point I'm satisfied with my work, because I realized I'm constantly fixing my painting because my drawing skill is not there. So again, that's the benefit of having a mentor is he can help you to get to the next stage by working out some of your weaknesses, so you don't spend years going down that path just to find out that you have to kind of come back around. So anyways, with all of that and experimentation, I think it's a great point to get into what do you do next after you establish a really solid drawing, painting, whatever skill. Like, what do you do next?
Yeah,
Hey.
I think the
Oh, Joel.
So yeah, I wanted to chime in on that because I'm definitely in that same boat as well. Young 40s, no 9-to-5 job, and the art's kind of my therapy and little side thing. But something I find that's really helped me out the past couple of years, just between the hours of 5 and 7 in the morning. So I just wake up, get up out of bed, whether I like it or not. And I have my dedicated art time each day to just work on stuff. And it's over the past year has made such a difference.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's something I sort of saw, like out of the corner of my eye, somebody say, how do you find the time? And it's about blocking out time in your day and protecting that time so that it's art making, and I know, I've learned that lesson many a times, especially coming out of school and having to do multiple things, and teach. I had to teach I'm the first artist of my family, so I had to teach my family that I'm home, but I'm working, and then I just became a father. It's gonna be 2 years ago, and again, it sort of reshuffles things, and you have to find time. You have I have less time than I've ever had before, but I have to do more work, because my career is growing. And so being protective about that time and being, allowing yourself just to focus on that, I think that's going to be, that first type of step, because you really need the space. This is the thing, like you really need the space to allow yourself to grow. And that does take time. It's different times, for people, and what growth means is different for many people. But you still need that space to do it, because it can't be like 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. If you have just 5 minutes, then that it is what it is, But you need, I think, as long as you can get that time blocked out, then that you'll start to see results, because it'll allow you to get consistency. And I think, like, when you're building your voice, you need that, because when you start to experiment, and when you start to just make pieces that you enjoy, and that's you hone in on what it is that you want to do and what you enjoy doing, a dialogue starts to happen between yourself and your work. It's a crazy thing. I heard painters like John Singer Sargent, right? I've read writings, accounts of how John Singer Sargent would mumble to himself when a painting was going wrong, mumbled demons, right? And he would talk to his painting. And I was like, that sounds insane, but here I am upstairs, the other day, and I'm talking to my painting. And I remember my wife was like, who are you talking to? And I was like, oh, no, I'm just figuring something out, but it's like this internal dialogue, of, the painting is going to say something, you're going to do something, the painting's going to react back to it. That part of that experimentation is where you start to hone in on making something that excites you. And I think a personal voice, requires you to ask questions like, what am I into? Who am I as a person? Why do I like doing artwork? What do I want to share with the world? It doesn't have to be anything again, grandiose, if it can be, if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be, like Josh Hawthorne in his book said, he said to a student, he says, don't paint something that's already beautiful, because it's already beautiful. You're not adding anything to it. Make me care about a rusty pot. Find the beauty in that. And if you could show the beauty in this rusted old pot that's been discarded, then you would have learned something. And that always kind of stuck with me. So all of these, these paintings really kind of express that, have that idea in it. The painting that you see on the left was a visual essay that I did. I was really into these sort of illustrated, basically these essays. Like it came from an illustrator by the name of Robert Weaver, and this was back in the 50s, where he would get hired to illustrate a multi-page article, and they still do it from time to time. But this was like he put together this visual essay where he takes the viewer through everything, through his drawings, like a children's book would, essentially. But it was about something that was real, and so it was a documentary type of feel with it. And so this was part of a series that I did of my grandfather on my mother's side, and my family after he had passed away. They lived. My family's from Puerto Rico, so I used to visit them every summer when I was a kid. And this trip documented what it was like when he wasn't there, and how the land had changed and things like that, and what time does. And then after I was done with that, I found like I wanted to investigate other things that I grew up with. And so the second one is a horse painting. It's like, what, horses, right? And I started a series of horse racing paintings, or that was surrounded around the tracks of Belmont and Aqueduct, horse racing tracks in New York City, and that's where I'm from. I'm from Queens originally, and the reason why is because my father, my grandfather, all the men in my family would bet horses. They all loved it, and I would go to OTBs. I would go to the track, and there's a whole language to it that I realized that I knew, just from growing up around it. And I hate gambling and I'm allergic to horses, so I thought it was a perfect subject matter for me to investigate. And so then after I was done with that, that's when I started illustrating a lot more. And then I realized, my life had changed. And so as, I was in a new location in Buffalo, I lived in a separate place. And so that became more of my reality. And that's where I paint. I paint things around my house and around, my neighborhood that I frequent all the time. And usually single thing has a story behind it. But that's something that I'm drawn to. And in order to get there, I had to experiment a lot and ask myself a lot of questions and just be honest with myself. Am I painting this because I saw somebody else do it? Am I painting this just to impress this artist that was, dead 300 years ago? Like I would do those things. I would say, I would love it. Dean Cornwell would love this piece. Like I want to paint it for him, internally, like this way and that way, or I want to do this, and so having my skills though, skill building and drawing all the time, I was a lot, I did all these different things, I would ask myself questions like, well, why do I have to oil paint? Maybe I want to do acrylics or just line drawings. And I have a bunch of those experiments. And that's when I started, with the skills and that understanding, I study other artists and how they work. And this goes back to the previous question, about mentorships. So the thing about that is that, like, you have to make sure, I shouldn't talk in absolutes, but it's really helpful if you surround yourself with a person that can explain things different ways. Because I've had great artists, teachers that were fantastic artists, but only could explain it one way. It was just this linear thing. And if I didn't understand it, I felt it was like my fault, and I realized that it wasn't, great teachers are able to cater it to you, because everyone's needs are different, at the end of the day. And so it's about being able to identify that. I think that's super, super important. And know that, like, if you don't get a concept, it's probably because it just hasn't been explained to you in a way that you understand it. And that's totally fine. Or maybe you need another piece of information before you get to the new one. And when I was developing my voice, and when my voice continues to develop, I'm always doing that. I'm always looking at pieces, looking at paintings, but also looking at being aware of my life, and being sensitive to things that, for me and my work, that other people would normally just pass by. But I've gotten to a point with my skills that my eyes are so sensitized to things like capturing light and capturing certain colors and things like that. And I remember people would come up to me and say, "Did you really see those colors? I mean, I never knew the light would hit that. Like, where is that?" I was like, "Oh, that's that house that's down this street." It's like, "Oh, I've driven by that." Or somebody said, in the first slide, there was a red house. Somebody had told me, had messaged me saying, like, I saw you did a painting of the red house. I lived there. And at first I didn't recognize it. And where was that? And I knew it was my house, but I never saw it like that. And I used to see that all the time, because I would run in the summers with my wife when it's nice outside and it's not snowing like it usually is in Buffalo. But I would see that house right around 5:30. I would always see that house like that. And so you see, I start when you sensitize your eyes and they're really developed, you start to notice these things, and the beauty, and just sort of common things, because they're not really common. They're just, I mean, all of these things are, there's wonders everywhere. So yeah, what do you think, Keith?
Yeah, this is really interesting because as you're talking about finding your voice in this journey, I didn't feel like you're trying to find a voice that will please buyers, even though we're talking about, like key stages to become a gallery artist, right? But it's not like the buyers, the collectors are not in this journey, this picture yet. Is that true? Like you were
Yeah.
kind of discovering your voice with yourself, with your life and all that stuff. You're not really trying to say, oh, can I? Because that's what I felt in the trap when I started out is when I decided to be a professional artist or a gallery artist, because my mentor, Dale Parson, told me, Keith, you have potential. If you really want to get in, this is what you need to do. Spend a year, produce 12 gallery-worthy paintings, bring into a gallery. I have connections. I can put you in contact with them. Go. And then at that point, I was like, awesome. Great advice. Seems very clear, right? 12 paintings in a year, gallery-worthy. But I didn't realize that the term gallery-worthy is as vague as possible. Like,
Yeah.
but then I took it the wrong way. I thought what you meant gallery worthy is paint something that people will buy. So I spent the whole first year, and that's when we had our first kid. Spend the whole first year really say, I'm gonna be a professional artist in my home, where I call it studio, 8 hours a day, crank out 12 paintings that people will buy and bring to a gallery, then I'll make it. But the idea of finding a voice or create a body of work that people will buy kill my creative juice. I could not paint anything. So I ended up with a room full of unfinished paintings, and I started hating painting because I didn't know where I'm going. And that kind of echo back to this great question Sarah is asking is, could you describe the structure you will use in your mentorship to help mentees gain the skills or even dovetail into the voice they needed? Because when we talk about a mentorship, it's not just a vague, let me mentor you idea. We design each mentorship with a specific goal, and yours is focused on gallery artists. Or if you guys feel like, hey, you want to take on side jobs as illustrator, Ray is able to help you with that because he's done it. So it's kind of like around this making a living as a professional artist scope. Whereas Kai, he is actually starting his first class right now. He's is focused more on alla prima painting to get your painting mileage. If you want to just learn the alla prima technique so you can finish paintings in one sitting and keep going and paint a lot and get really good faster, that is the program for you. But let's get back on your program. Like, how will you structure your mentorship to help individual students to not only acquire the skills, but push it further? While they're acquiring their skills, they can discover their voice too, because that's your end goal, right? Let's talk about that a little bit. It doesn't mean that you have to get the mentorship with Ray. This is a structure we design together to help our students the best. You can go explore and find all different ways, but if you feel like this is something that you believe in, Ray has done it before. Like, it's much easier if we know what we're doing, if we've seen success before, follow what works, and of course we tweak it a little bit to make it more online format to serve a lot more students who cannot go to universities teaching in the past to join the program. So maybe take the next couple minutes to describe that.
Yeah, it's a great question, Sarah. Thanks for asking it. It's the way I structure it is that we start off with just basic base level skills. It's really a gauge of like who, where you're at, on just a visual acuity, like on your skill level wise. And then from there, we start to talk about different principles that, maybe it's light at first, it's like light and shadow. And we introduce how to go about taking something that's super complicated, like light hitting a form. And it's all these things going on. And how do we break it down into manageable bits so that we don't have to take everything in and drive ourselves crazy. And so we will all work on like a same assignment, and because the subject is relevant, it's about executing the light, right? And it's it's usually a simple still life, and we keep it monochromatic so that we could study value, and that's our goal, is understanding how to control that. But as soon as possible, I want students trying to then take what they've learned and put it into their own work, because that's what we're here for, right? Is to be able to introduce those things into the work that you're already doing, because that's when they really become, useful to you. And so, and that, and what the mentorship is, it's sort of meant to do that. So it's taking that, and then we're getting complex still lives. What if I have different, instead of monochromatic, what happens if I have multiple objects that have different types of local values? Some are dark, some are light, and what do I do with that? Maybe that's sort of a gap, and then we assess that and talk about strategies and how to go about attacking or solving that visual problem. And again, we'll introduce that into our work, and then we'll go to painting, and then say like, hey, remember all this stuff in drawing that we were doing with charcoal? Well, this is the painting version of those steps, same thing, and here's how you can experiment with that. So you do it first the same way, and then later on you say, okay, how do I do this, how do I do that? Because you might find out, and this is the reason why Keith and I were talking about doing it with having a sort of drawing and painting, that you really like the feel of drawing. Maybe you just like doing charcoal. One of my students who's a great artist, her name is Trisha Butsky. She was an oil painting student. She took life drawing with me, and I remember she was liked painting but really loved drawing, and is now doing incredibly wonderful, beautiful, large scale, huge scale, like charcoal drawings. And they're absolutely beautiful. But it's about, she went through that process of asking herself those different types of questions. But I set up the way I set up my classes at the university I taught at, was, even though I was an adjunct, I had classes that led into each other. And so that's how I setting up my mentorship, but it's like on steroids, because not only that, it's not only is it linear, it's also non-linear in a way, because maybe you are progressing through, because the goal is to get you to start painting, right? Maybe you have to work on proportion or something like that in a piece. So you're struggling with maybe it's a certain angle, of a head. Can't do it in a 3/4 view or something, right? I'm having trouble. I want to do these heads that are underlit, but I just can't figure. I'm struggling. I'm doing well with the traditional lighting, but I can't do non-traditional lighting. What's going on? And so, I would then, you'll get directed back to an exercise where maybe we just simplify it. Instead of color, we'll do a simple black, a monochromatic painting. Or instead of painting, let's do a simple monochromatic drawing explaining that process. And so you could jump back and forth as needed. And I think that's where the structure of this that we're building is where it's going to be really powerful, because that means you're constantly learning. So
and we talk about, again, right, we focus on the framework to help you to acquire more tools in your toolbox, and more importantly, to understand how to use all of those tools at the same time. Not like all at the same time, but know when to use what tool for what situation. And of course, we're not just talking about drawing, painting, pencil, charcoal. Ray is also going to introduce you guys to Photoshop and some digital tools to experiment more there, to form ideas, play with compositions. As many of you know, David Dibble is great with Photoshop and manipulate his reference photos to play with ideas. He gets 50 plus ideas before he even start touching oils. So that is another great value of this program. And we really talk about his Ray right here. He talked about his traditional teaching in the universities, and we're looking at it and say, nowadays everything is so much more advanced with technology. Are we able to provide a 4-year degree equivalent program without forcing people through 4 years? And I think there's a way to that, just by giving you the right tool, introduce you to the right concept at the right time, and optimize your study time. That means if you're really good at this, you still need to practice it, but you don't need to spend another semester, 3 months, or even a year to be perfect at drawing. We should move you on something else that you're weaker, and then sharpen that up. So all of a sudden you have really good 2 sets of sharp tools. And then we just keep adding that back to your tool set. Then you will resharp at a lot of things. Because by the end of the day, while you are discovering your voice, essentially what you're doing is you're juggling with a lot of things: shape, value, color temperature, composition, edges, boom, 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 still life, like portraits, even architecture here. You need to do all of that at the same time. So if you are just really good at one thing, but suck at everything else or have no experience, it's going to be really difficult. It's not impossible. It'll be difficult. And our job is to make that easier for you to get to that endpoint. And what is the endpoint here, which is our next topic here, is once you kind of balance that skill and the voice, at the same time, you need to kind of think about the market, right? Because like we said, this program, the goal is to help you to get into market, to be out there. So Ray, why don't you talk about the market side of things? Because I know there's a lot of people. Okay, I see Sarah has a follow-up question here. Jumping back and forth in a curriculum while trying to solve our own visual problems sounds cool. Okay, that it does sound cool, because that's what we do with visual storytelling, right? You're solving problems. You don't work on just one area of the painting, especially if you're working on something big. You got to jump back and forth and solve all different problems. And that's where Ray comes in, is every week, if you face a new problem in your work, he's coming in to help you debug it together as a group. And that helps everybody in the group to learn it in multiple times. If we have 4 problems here, you learn how to avoid 4 problems. And week after week after week, you're going to be a great problem solver. And the next question is, will Photoshop be part? Yeah, like we talk about it, Photoshop is an essential part of this. And I know Ray even had a little example video on his sign-up page where he leveraged a 3D skull head model to help you understand the portrait painting. And I think that's under your critique example, if I remember correctly. Go check it out.
Yeah.
Let's get into the market side.
Sure.
I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah. So just to sort of finalize what Keith was saying, in terms of feedback, because I never really actually talked about that, I am working over your work. I'd be working over your work digitally, and you would have an actual mock-up of me painting on top of it. So because I could tell you, like, the nose needs to be moved in, but it's and I could say, or like, you need to go lighter in your values, or you need to go darker in your values, or so on and so forth. But unless I show you, it's impossible for you to really understand, right, what I'm looking at. So I like to work right on top of people's work. I do it all the time. So and with digital, it's not destructive. So I'm not messing anything up. So the market. So you have a voice, right? You have a body of work that you're putting together that is cohesive, right? And for me, it was, again, the people, places and things, people, places and things of where I live around. And if you do enough of them that is consistent to that, then you will have a body of work. It's as simple as that. But it's about being consistent with that vision. If I wanted to go back to the horse racing paintings and did that, then I had that wouldn't necessarily, that would be a different body of work, and that's totally fine to have. But I wouldn't intermix it with the body of work that I have here. But I like, me personally, I don't like to do just one thing because my background is an illustrator. So I like portraits, I like figures, I like all these things. And so I wanted to set myself up so that I was able to paint all of those and it still feel like it's a cohesive thing. And so, but once you have that, you have to start researching the places that it will ultimately end up. And this is something that I think it was Max had brought up, like where do you show this stuff? Is it galleries? Is it boutique shops? Is it on your own in your website? You have to, the first step is researching artists that you like, whose careers that you want to kind of model after, and see what their solutions are. Ultimately, everyone's solution to this age-old problem is going to be unique to themselves, right? It's like, what do you want out of it? But what I can tell you with galleries is that you have to make sure that you are researching the galleries that show the type of work that you do. Because you might have beautiful work, you might have beautiful still life work, but a gallery that is that doesn't show still lifes and shows only figures and landscapes is not going to want your work, because that's not who they sell work to, right? And so with my work, not all of my galleries, all three of my galleries that I have. So I have My Bomb Fine Arts at Bend, A Bend Gallery in Denver, Colorado, My Bomb's in East Aurora, New York, and Principal Gallery in Alexandria, Virginia. They all like different types of work that I do. So I need to make sure that I'm, even after I get the galleries, I'm sending them those types of work, and focusing my work, that work in that location. But in order to get a gallery, you have to make sure that, again, you are researching and finding galleries that show the type of work that you like, and really, really do your research. I think one of the things that I find is, after talking to many gallery owners, is that you'd be shocked at how many times they receive work from artists, while nice, has nothing to do with the type of work that they show, like absolutely nothing. And so you don't let that happen to you, right? Because they won't even look at your portfolio that you've worked so hard to put together. People usually ask me how many pieces. You want to have, I say 10, right? Just give yourself a number that is, double digits, at least 10 paintings. Or, he said, his teacher said 12. That works too. But you're going to need work, a decent amount of work that you can actually send to galleries when they say, yep, sounds great, here, send us these paintings, because again, you're going to need to establish some sort of inventory. So having 10 cohesive works or bodies or paintings that are in a body of work allows you to show a gallery that, hey, this is who I am, right? And this is what you're going to get out of me when you ask for work and you invite me to shows, and I can maintain the same high level of quality across the board. And so, and it's visually cohesive. And it's all about kind of, I know a lot of people ask, because I get this asked all the time, okay, I've got a body of work, but I'm always like, there's different things that I'm always growing as an artist. I'm always like, I have different interests and things like that. What do I do? How long do I wait? All I have to, all I can say to that is that, because you're in a gallery, you get a gallery, doesn't mean that you're going to be there for the rest of your life. You will change, and that's okay. But you just have to make sure that you have a cohesive body of work first to get into your gallery, if that's what you want to do. And in this case, that's what our end goal is, right? And so make sure that you have that established. And then, it's important to research your gallery and ask them what they're looking for in artists. And some galleries, not all galleries are created equal. I know I have galleries that are, or I've worked with galleries that all they do is sell work. That's it. If it, and how successful pieces are is whether or not they sell, right? And I've shown in really, really nice places that have that attitude, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine, because at the end of the day, that's what we want, right? We want to be able to get revenue for it, or so that it can support you, so we can support ourselves. And there are other galleries that are interested, absolutely. They're all businesses, right? That are interested in selling work, but also interested in working with an artist, and working, and so there's a lot more of a personal connection. And I always believe that you should have at least one gallery that is willing to work with you and grow with you and really believes in you as an artist, and because once you have that, then you can confide in them, what your interests are, and they could try their best to help you. And really great galleries are able to help you with that, great gallerists. So always research that, once you have the galleries, though, the way I looked at it from all the galleries that I had, I would ask the artists that were already in the galleries, what do you think? I remember I was applying to a gallery and I asked an artist what they thought, because they were in the gallery for a while. It was good. I mean, the roster was pretty good. I was like, wow, this is great. I said, how is the gallery? I'm thinking about applying. And they emailed me back saying like, well, I haven't gotten paid in months, and I know I've sold paintings, so I'm pulling out of that gallery, so, avoiding, doing your research will help you also avoid the unfortunate parts of the business where, gallerists don't hold up their end of the bargain. Because again, like I mentioned before, you are going into a relationship with your gallery. It's not a passive thing. They're bringing people to your work and you're bringing people to them. And it's this back and forth. And you're always checking in on inventory. You're constantly in communication. What's working, what's not working, what do you think? And understanding and being able to track all of that stuff, and manage those aspects, I think is something that every artist needs if they're going to be a gallery artist.
Yeah.
It's
Hey, Ray.
go ahead.
Also, I just had a thought. Of course, this whole market research thing is not like a 2-day task. You go out and do research for 2 days, perfect, move on, and it will never happen again. It's gonna be a career-long process, and that's why, as Ray and I will talk about designing the mentorship structure, we, like Ray's gonna come up with checklist items, and they'll be part of the program. Like probably not every week because you have the skill side of things to work on, but he will kind of, as a group, assign specific topics, voice related, market research related, and assign you guys to work through some of these checklist items to be aware of all the things he's talking about now, plus more. And that will kind of help you to stay sharp and then reach out, because you're going to be out there reaching out, researching different market or galleries, but without a mentor guiding you to say, hey, just like right now, think about the payment structure, right? You never knew to ask that unless someone tell you that. And there are a million other things to ask or be aware. And Ray will kind of assign you guys bring back the research, and based on the research you bring back, have a discussion, and he will trigger new things for you to think about. For example, what do you mean by grow with an artist? Expand on that. And that will kind of tie back to this question Sarah is asking. I think what she's trying to say is probably about once you have a body of work, portfolio, style, or voice, you call it, apply or pursue certain galleries, you think this style will fit that gallery. Or for example, Ray here, once you get in the first one, do you just keep working in that same style or body of work and produce that way? Or can you work on different variation of your portfolio and enter into different galleries in different places? For example, Brian Mark Taylor, he would have specific paintings, more like coastal stuff for Laguna Beach gallery, because people are tourists over there. They want a piece of Laguna Beach to go with them. And then he also has something more like European stuff for different galleries when he traveled back to Italy or whatever. And can you talk a bit about that from the portfolio variation perspective? And then also, when should you care about that? Because you don't want to be like starting out and then worry about 3 portfolios when you can't even get 1 started, right? So let's talk about that a little bit, and that'll be perfect to kind of go into a brief portfolio review. We have another half an hour there, and we can just open it up. You guys can start, if you want to start sending images through chat, that way he's got something lined up. Once we get there, after this question answer, we can get it started.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, I think the kind of goes back to the answer to this goes back to kind of the voice. You got to put together 10 paintings that all look like they came from the same artist, right? And have a specific, a voice to them, a specific look to them. Like for instance, Brian or like people like Jeremy Mann was a good friend of mine's, or he still is a good friend of mine's. They're great painters, like Greg Gandy. I went to school with them, and Jeremy loved cityscapes, and so that's what he wanted to paint. And he painted them in a specific way. He had multiple styles, by the way. He had 2 completely different portfolios. I remember him telling me, like a traditional landscape. You can still see it on his website, and his cityscapes where he was using like a roller. Jeremy Mann, Mann, if you've never heard of his work. And so the reason why you want a 10, a good amount of paintings, 10 is a good amount to me at least, is to also know whether or not you really like the subject matter that you're painting. Because maybe you're just excited about this one subject, but maybe it's not for this, the reason that you thought it was originally. I know of a lot of just from teaching, a lot of students, they'll start an idea and get really excited about it, and then they run out of gas and just absolutely hate the idea. And so it's my job as a mentor to kind of guide you into that. It's like allow you to explore that, and in order to give you insight into why you're drawn to a specific subject, or why, or maybe it has nothing to do with the subject at all. Maybe it might be the light, might be the color, it might be you like vintage things, or so on and so forth, and sort of nailing that down. From there, you have to be calculated on what you show, what you send galleries. Like Mark, Brian was, but Keith was saying that Brian was only send specific things to his galleries, and he knows that the galleries that he deals with only show those things, right? It goes back to that. Like you can paint whatever you want. You just have to make sure that the galleries, you have galleries that, show that stuff. It just kind of goes back to that. And it all depends on the type of artist that you want to be. And so at least with my mentorship, I always ask you, like, what are you into? What are your hopes? What are your expectations? Because everyone has different expectations, and that's totally fine. That's totally fine. And everyone has different interests, and that's actually great. That's what makes you, unique, and that's what can make you unique as an artist. And so, but again, it's from there, then you can build out a plan to then get you to where you want to get to. And in terms of galleries, allow you to give you sort of a roadmap to say, okay, I got to research 3 galleries and just 3 artists that I like, and see where they're showing. Because you actually might find out at the end of the day that the artists that you like don't show in galleries. They have like an odd end, an oddball like group show here and there, but they actually sell online. And so that's a different venue. And you would explore that, as well, because I have a store, and I've sold pieces out of it. I've sold things on social media as well, and it demands a different type of focus. And so, I haven't done it as much recently because it was focus that I needed to put towards other things. But again, it's all, you're constantly evolving, and platforms are changing all the time. Right, Keith? Like 10 years ago, there wasn't any of this stuff. So like, that's a flash in the pan. And so,
or even now,
always change.
Yeah, even now Instagram is trying to compete with TikTok. So they don't even care about images anymore. They care more about videos, and
Right.
like you don't even have enough time to show people your work to get enough attention or impression for them to appreciate your work. Then the platform is even designed with that little twitch on the bottom to move the video up, because they want you to scroll. They don't want you to stay on one video too long. They want a tons of them. So things are changing, and that's part of the key things about Ray's role in this program is he will help you to ask yourself all these things so you don't stay still. Like, you don't want to be the person who stays still and not moving up. You want to stay on top of the, you know, the trend, technology, or even, you know, like what is out there. Like there's so many things, it's constantly moving. So having someone that you can trust to keep you moving along, it's a great resource. And I see, hey, Louisa is back. She was here last time when you went live. So she just sent over a piece. I'm gonna get out of this screen share so Ray can switch it over. And if you want to take a second to download that,
yeah,
I will kill the time while we transition.
Okay, cool. Did you email it to me? I see a bunch of stuff in the
It's on the chat.
it's on the chat. Okay, cool.
Yeah, up a little bit. There's a file there.
Perfect. Yep.
Yeah.
I see Luis's here. Okay, great.
And then as he downloads that, the last slide here is the, you know, portfolio review. But as you can see, there are some screenshots of Ray's process, you know, using Photoshop, or even I think the second one, is that the video we did? The third one.
No, that's a so the first one is me working over a student's piece and an example of like a paint over. The second one is a kind of what you would a demo that I've done where you see like kind of how my mentorship will be set up. It's actually going to be set up even better than that, you know. 3 cameras, and you're going to see every single color I mix, every stroke I make. And the last 2 are actually demos that I recorded that are part of establishing a hybrid approach, digital traditional. How do you combine those 2 things? And that in this case was a head painting where the underpainting was done digitally, and the color was put on top traditionally with oil paint. So
that's really cool. Especially, I just want to let you guys know you guys are lucky, because I wish I had a mentor like this back when I started, because you are getting more than just a oil painting teacher. That's what I had. The funny thing is Dell, he started out as an illustrator. So I noticed that illustrators, you guys are designed to work fast, designed to basically know how to paint anything, still life, portrait, landscape, architecture, whatever it is. And on top of that, you guys are the greatest storytellers. And on top of that, you are tech savvy. That's like a whole bunch of check marks, check. So if you really want to like focus in and set 2023 on track to kickstart your career and do that with confidence, reach out to us, reach out to Ray, ask more questions, because this is a really rare opportunity, especially we're trying to shrink down that 4 years of curriculum and then make it more flexible to work towards your weakness, so you don't need to go through that long process again. I think it's really worth looking into it. But are you ready to go share your screen now? Okay.
Yep. I'm gonna share right now.
Allow that. Okay, then we can go to that right now.
Okay, cool. Let's see. All right. So Michelle's, I actually have yours up first here. Did everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I just renamed my Luis's piece, and I gotta renamed it a letter that a computer couldn't read. All right. So I'm going to be going through this work pretty fast. It's something I wouldn't do in mentorship. I mean, it's a lot of you know, it's a lot of questions, you know, that I usually ask when, in the 2-hour span that we spend once a week. And so it'll be a lot of sort of back and forth on this thing. But since we only have 21 to maybe 20 minutes, I'm gonna just analyze the work as I see it, but feel free to shoot me a message back if you have any sort of follow-up questions on this. So I think I really, first of all, I really love the flow of paint, or how you're kind of handling things like the grass right here. I think you're using different types of marks. Looks like some are like palette knife almost, it looks like, and some others were with like a brush. Even if it was the same brush, you're getting a lot of mileage out of it, and I think that's awesome. And I think that's something that continue to experiment with it even more. I mean, I love the work of people like Andrew Wyeth, or like who experiment a lot with texture, and or artists like Kwang Ho, who is another just fantastic artist, especially when dealing with sort of textures. The things that I would I think as a subject matter, I think that's you can ask yourself, like, you could do sort of a whole set of paintings, of almost surrealist paintings of pieces of furniture in a landscape. That's actually something that you could build upon. And that there's definitely galleries that shows things like that. I'm trying to think of artists. As I talk, I'm sure artists will come in my head. So forgive me. My daughter woke me up really, really early today, so I'm a little like, what was that artist's name? I'm usually pretty good with names. So formally speaking, I think that you're getting the idea of like light and shadow, especially in these moments where you just have, it really feels like light is hitting this shoulder. So that concept is you're getting that across. I think it's just about being consistent. That's all it really is. I mean, like taking something like the head here. I know that the format of the head is, who that person is. Is this a self-portrait? Yeah. So you're getting that likeness down. I think that the sort of some of the values that you have, and this is a quick trick in Photoshop, or you could, any image editing program has this. You just create like another layer like this, and paint bucket it black, and turn this down to color, and then you can start to see all of the a really accurate display of your values. I've used hue saturation and black and white and all that stuff. It kind of distorts the values, and this is the most accurate that I've come across. Actually, a student of mine, former student of mine, had pointed it out to me. So you start to see that, yes, you're seeing some of the value right in here, but it gets a little bit hard to read what's going on, in the face, in terms of like the consistency of the light source. When you have light coming in from a place like this, you would have just, there's clear light side and shadow sides of a form, or clear places where the light is hitting the form, and clear places where the light isn't hitting the form. And so the trick to painting light and shadow is that you have to first establish kind of, it looks like you kind of did the way you painted it, a separation, the light side and shadow side. But then the trick to that is maintaining that as you're adding more values, right? It's always tricky. And so a lot of times what I'll do is after I've sort of covered everything, I'll go back and say, okay, what's light side, what's shadow side again? Because I need to know that in order for me to even start the painting at first. Because if I don't know it, then how is the viewer supposed to know? And then my next question when I'm going through is like, how do I resolve that, for myself? And so areas like I think the dress are probably where it becomes hardest to read. And my guess is probably because the reference itself was really hard to read that you drew from, or I'm guessing you drew from some reference, or if you drew from a mirror, or is it reference that you like photo reference that you drew from? Yeah, you can unmute your mic, Michelle. Sorry.
Yeah, it was a photo reference. Yep. I only
Cool.
had one kind of blown out a little bit. So
Yeah. So like, with stuff like that, it's about like, what's the end goal? If you really need to, if this is about light and shadow and the figure sitting, what type of information do you need to sort of execute that? And so like in certain areas like this, I could see that there's a cast shadow. So wherever the reference is clear, you're right there. You're putting things in and you're able to capture that. Where it's unclear, that's where the issue lies. And so my advice to you is that like you could use images like this, that you might have an image that might actually springboard an idea in your head. Like, it'd be great if I had this, but a lot of times you might need more reference to execute that vision. One of my favorite artists of all time, living or dead, is Thomas Blackshear. And Thomas Blackshear, if you've never seen his work, is
I have an
just—
original at home from him.
You have an original Thomas Blackshear?
When he came out, he came to HQ to do a live painting, and then he just looked at me when he's done. He said, "You want it?" So I have it. He's amazing.
Don't give me your address, Keith. Don't give me your address.
Anyways, I just want to throw that in. Such a nice guy.
It's one of the greatest. So Thomas, he gets a lot of inspiration from just everywhere. And I saw him in a talk take a Bob Dylan record cover and turn it into a Western painting. And he took the idea of like the composition and the light, and then reposed models to get the light source exactly the way he wanted it, to mimic it, but also build out the details. So like, he didn't like, maybe Bob Dylan, he just liked the hats. And so he didn't necessarily like the whole design of the hat, but the way the shadow casted on there. So he took that and mocked everything up. And so what a lot of figurative artists do is that they work from multiple references a lot of times. And in school, I was, taught to like lay out all those references in different ways. Some teachers like were able to just combine them on the fly, and others put together kind of they overlay tracing paper over the different references, traced them off, and then built out like a layout plan for themselves. I now use Photoshop, which is just basically akin to like literally another of the third type, which is, I know illustrators that would just physically cut out and do like a paper doll of all these different photos, like a collage. And that's what I do for that. So you might take, like, let's say you really like this area right here. Then you might like one element, then get another reference for a dress, of some sort. And same thing goes for like, the couch. Whenever the light is coming from a source, when you're combining different things, also just make sure that you're just consistent with the light source. So like, if the light were coming from, it looks like it was coming from behind, and so this is in shadow, the light source should be here. There should be some sort of indication of like where the light might be there, and then you have to ask yourself, what was the light source like? Because sometimes it could be clear, sometimes it could be diffused in the reference itself. And so just like little things like that, and making sure kind of like where the landscape is, it has, these trees, even if you made them up or something, have it so that the trees are consistently being lit from the same direction as the light source itself, as the original light source. I think will help. So I think it's really just kind of a reference thing.
Oh, sorry, Ray, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to mention that these will be some exercises that Ray will take you guys through to leverage Photoshop. And
and how to take good reference too.
Yeah, it'll be much more clear to work through that process with him than just talking about it. But like those are just something that I'm really excited about your stuff, is that you will walk people through these approaches and do exercises to improve their workflow. Like a lot of stuff you're talking about here is all about your workflow, like building out that system, that framework, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it'll constantly change, but it allows you to, once you contextualize it and like, okay, this is how I can build something, then I think you'll be able to generate work a lot faster, because then the process is just a means of getting your idea out there, you know.
Yeah.
I'll think of an artist you know, in my head to kind of look at, but but like, for instance, like somebody like Mark Majori, right? You know, his paintings are stunning, right? But he's got incredible reference, though. I mean, he goes out to these types of you know, reenactments with like cowboys and things like that, and he takes actual references. And I, on Instagram, I have like a whole thing of like artists that I really love, you know, 3D, 2D, AI artwork, you know, whatever it is. And I always like to look at like how they're possibly, you know, working. I mean, like, I think this is a Jerome piece. Yeah, I don't know why it's so small, but you know, Jerome had that. He had that robe in there. He had that person sitting there, you know. And even that, you know, the 19th century painters were really famous for comping together all these different elements. But like, I think you have a great idea. I think you could, you know, I think it's just about putting the right information in front. So I hope that helps.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray. I think there's another one you downloaded, and then Sarah.
Yeah, I've got Sarah's website here, and I've got
Awesome.
I got Luis's, right? What did I do? There it is, right here.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes. Maybe we can go over a little bit. We probably won't.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
for sure. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah, I changed a couple of settings in Photoshop. Okay. All right, Luisa. Yeah. So I think the you know, your paintings, did we was Luisa in the first talk?
Yeah. She was the one with
so this was the pairs,
Yes.
right? Yeah, I do remember. Okay, so yeah, so I think that the you know, your pieces are this piece is great. You got a lot of nice brush strokes, a nice consistency to paint. I think using a lot of paint, I know I just used that for Michelle's, but like, you know, that was a big issue for me. Was I was so thin, I was so afraid of making a mistake, that you know, my pieces suffered because I didn't understand how to use thin paint, you know, because I was using thin paint for the wrong reasons, essentially. And so I think you're really clear about your strokes that you're putting down, and you're making sure that, you know, as a result, a lot of these shapes are clear as well. I think that the next step to like kind of enhance it is you can go in multiple sort of directions, but I think emphasis is something that, you know, I would continue to do. I think the way you have this structured, you know, this flower right here is beautifully placed, almost like on the third, you know, if I were to sort of cut it up, and it's a nice focal point. It's got some nice contrast in here, and it's sort of isolated. Now it's about kind of like further emphasizing that. I mean, I think this area right in here, this plant right here is, or flower, I should say, not plant, you know, is really interesting. But I think it's also has so much contrast in it that it's kind of pulling away from the viewer. Now, if that's the plant you want to focus on, then I would say, you know, you got to kind of restructure things so that this is, you know, this is getting the emphasis as this is getting. But I'm guessing, you know, that this is where you want the viewer to kind of appreciate first and then go throughout. In terms of emphasis, you know, you have a really painterly style, probably like the strokes like that. And so my recommendation is dial down some of the information that you're having on the areas that aren't the focal point, and use that as a means to support, you know, the thing you want the viewer to look at. And that's essentially how do you do that is you don't paint everything kind of the same way, or you have a consistency to the way you're painting things. And so right here, you notice like you have a nice separation between light and shadow. It's getting light and shadow. It's really nicely diffused down. You're knocking down the values. Let's just do the old thing that we just did with Michelle's here. Look, we could see it right there, right? So, you know, this is about kind of this is knocking down, so that means that's diffused down, so the contrast is not as severe. And this is pumping, you know, this is really showing a lot of contrast, but you can start to see that, you know, there are areas where it's blending in, but this is still, this is sort of coming out, probably you know, unintentionally. So dialing those areas back, but actually simplifying the shape so that you just have maybe light and shadow. And it kind of the way you kind of handled this, but maybe just like a couple of, you got to find kind of the strokes, maybe here and here, just to say like, hey, this is a different type of flower. And then, you know, just balance it out. You might go in and maybe sharpen up some of these details right in here. So as soon as you knock this area back and then sharpen up details here, that's when the emphasis is going to be even more established, you know. And then the same thing, you know, goes into here in terms of like, some of these areas are kind of running a tangent with each other, or like you have a stroke that kind of breaks up in a weird way. So it's like kind of going off the like in a direction that's not helping this. Like you see, like you have these wonderful strokes coming down in here. That's great. That's really great stuff. But any stuff that doesn't help that, like if it goes off, you know, just change it, you know. And so there's a back and forth on it. My recommendation to you when it comes to painting like this, I would just take a photo of this painting, print it out really small, and just paint right on top of it, just to see what you could lose and what you need to emphasize, or paint right on top of it digitally if you have an iPad or have Photoshop and know how to do that. But really nice stuff. Hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
then
that is helpful.
and then Sarah, I think you have a nice, you know, it's a cohesive body of work in terms of subject, you know, a lot of outdoor stuff, really nice. You know, you have moments where, you know, really nice big shapes too. You know, I see some David Dibble in here, you know, like with the barns. He's in my head. He's like, whenever I see a barn, I think of David, you know. And so
Hey,
I think
Ray,
yeah.
On that note, that is a sign that you successfully created your brand and your voice. If someone sees something and they can think of you, right?
Yeah. It's a really, really weird thing. Like it coming about like that. I mean, I've had people, David, you know, and some other artists and some other people would just shoot me a message randomly, you know. I had a collector shoot me a message saying, hey, I was out for groceries and this building made me think of you. And it's like, you know, building with the sun coming down. It's like, oh yeah. Yeah, it's so funny, you know. But you know, it's like about it's really delving into your interests. And so I think as a portfolio or of a body of work, you generated a lot of work, which is great. I think it's just about more so like, where do you want to go with it consistency wise, you know, because there's certain things like, for instance, this is a lot more kind of simplified type of approach to on the landscape painting. And this is more kind of, you know, abstracted in a sense, you know, where, you know, it's almost surreal in a way. And some have like, see, some don't have light sources, some do have like sort of distinct light sources, and other ones have a mixture of the two where it's kind of flat kind of going. And I think it's about kind of putting together a set of paintings that express one. And then here you're going abstract in many cases, or really, really dark. And this is more kind of like a plein air type of feel. And this is more kind of, you know, this is the one that you have actual writing in. So I think that the trick to it is just editing out things that might not feel as consistent, you know. So picking up, I know we all have like different tons of interests and tons of different approaches to things. I think it's just about delving down into what about landscapes you really like, and who are the paintings that you like. Because I see a lot of growth in here, you trying out different things, and that's great. That's fantastic, and it's something that I applaud you for doing. but I wouldn't put that growth on in a portfolio, because your portfolio is saying, hey, this is who I am as a painter. A gallery might look at that and say, like, I don't know who you are. You have good moments here, you have great moments there, but completely different types of paintings. And truth is, all artists are, visually schizophrenic in that sense. And so, but you've got to present yourself in a way that is not that, so that they know that they can market you as like, okay, this is the type of painter. Sarah does these wonderfully cropped landscapes with like, an occasional airplane in the air, or talking about the sky, or again, barns, or, these sort of simplified landscapes, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I hope that was helpful. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, especially when you talk about like having the portfolio ready and what you want to convey there. I want to help you guys to kind of think about it as a resume. Like traditionally, when we go find a job somewhere else, we produce a piece of paper, is our resume, right? And I'm a true believer of a one-pager resume, because that shows to me, because my past life, I was in the corporate management, I have the curse and blessing to hire people and go through job interviews. And I always look for one-pagers, because that tells me you put in enough thought into your resume, and you are a person who understands prioritizing. If you understand how to prioritize, it's not about how much you add on there to prove yourself, but about the fact that you understand what to remove to highlight what you're really good at. I want to look for someone who's really, really good at something versus someone who's good at many things, but not great at something, if that makes sense. So if you look at your portfolio, you need to kind of think about that to say, this is what I want to showcase. I'm great at barns, or I'm great at XYZ. And that's what you want to convey in your portfolio, rather than say, hey, look, I'm a great artist. I can basically paint anything. Well, that doesn't really say anything to the gallery owner, because they need someone who's great at painting a barn, because they have a lot of collectors coming here for barn paintings. And in order to sell your work, to represent you, they need to have the full confidence to tell their collector base to say, this is Ray, he's known for XYZ and he's great at it. Or even better, he's the best at this. So I hope that can kind of conclude our session today. And thanks, Ray, for taking extra time. And I know you got woken up really early, but part of life, right?
Yeah. No worries. Yeah. I'm usually like, I have 4 or 5 different artists. I think the last time I was like riddling off artists, so I couldn't, but now I'm just like a blank, slate. But I would, if you haven't followed me, if you want, like, if you're interested in the type of painting like this that I do, follow me on Instagram, because I like to share in my stories artists that I really enjoy. I mean, you don't have to follow me, but you could go to my Instagram and just go to my stories, and you'll see them like pop up, and then just click on them, because I'm like interested in all bunch of stuff. And so that's kind of a way that you could build up a visual library of inspiration to kind of help you direct where you want to go if you're feeling like you're a little bit, all over the place. And yeah, so thank you so much for your time, everyone. And thanks, Keith, for, thinking about putting this together. I hope this information was helpful to you. And yeah, if you're interested in signing up for my mentorship, I'm looking forward to working with you, because I think it's basically what we talked about today, but way more in depth, and way more hands-on, for sure. So,
and the best part about it, which is why we spend so much time, imagine we have this a lot, okay, guys, and we're inviting you to be part of this conversation in this room with Ray weekly, on a weekly basis. And really, this is a great time, beginning of the year. If you really want to make it this year, like I said, my mentor told me 12 paintings a year. That's 1 painting a month. And Ray can really set you on track to say, hey, let's start where you're at if you're ready, or if you are not quite ready yet, let's set out a clear goal by Q1, Q2, Q3, whatever, let's set a goal that by a certain time you would have X number of pieces ready to go. If it doesn't work out, he's gonna help you correct it. But you're gonna walk away with body of work and research done and all these things. So it's becoming a very clear path to get there rather than that great advice. Don't get me wrong, it's a great advice I received. 12 gallery worthy painting in a year. Very great advice, but I had no idea how to get there. That's why I'm not a gallery artist and I'm running a business now. But I don't want you guys to make that same mistake. So make sure you check out Ray's program. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And we will start the program later this month. So I hope you guys enjoy the session and get as much as you can out of this. And Ray and I will be available. We have open door policy. Just hit us up, but at the same time, respect Ray's time. You know, don't hit him up with 20 portfolios and have an in-depth review on Instagram. But have a great new year, and I hope you guys all find success this year in 2023. We'll have a lot more live sessions like this to talk about different artists, share their stories, or even local artists that are making really impressive work. A lot of them are here today. We'll invite them in to talk about it. And thank you again. And thanks, Ray.